Hi, my name is zmaswan1 from ISA4220 Fall 2016, and today I'm going to be discussing vulnerability assessment scans. And the scans that I'm going to be discussing are from one of my class partners, Jason Clark, and the scans are Windows 2012 R2, and the IP address for the Windows system is 192.168.6.32, and then the Linux Ubuntu 16.04 server with an IP address of 192.168.6.33. There are two types of scans that we ran throughout this process. The first one is the Nessus scan, which is a remote security scanner, and this software can audit any network that is given and figure out what any weaknesses are present that may cause allowance of certain attackers to penetrate the system. It works by launching a predefined exploit and then does a report on how far the exploit was successful. And we also have Nmap, and Nmap is a utility used in discovering network for security audits. You can use it for scanning a large network or a single host swiftly and accurately to determine the hosts that are available, the services every host is running, and the operating system that it uses. The vulnerability ranking that we're using for this scan are high, medium, and low. If a vulnerability scan has a category of high, there is a strong need to take corrective measures. A system already in existence may continue with these operations, but there has to be a corrective measure in plan put in action as soon as possible. And if a vulnerability scan has a rating of medium, corrective actions are needed and a plan must be developed to incorporate these actions within a reasonable period of time. And if a vulnerability scan is rated as low, the system's authorizing officials must decide whether there is any corrective actions that need to be taken or if the vulnerability is acceptable. And looking at the Windows system, the vulnerabilities that we found, there were no high or critical vulnerabilities that were found on the system, but we had a total of 8 vulnerabilities that had a criteria of medium, and 2 that were low vulnerabilities. And of the medium vulnerabilities, we have the security update for SAM and LSAT remote protocol, Bedlock, uncredentiated check, and that is medium. And we also have DNS server cache snooping, remote information disclosure, which is also a medium vulnerability. We also have an SSL certificate, cannot be trusted vulnerability, an SSL self-signed certificate vulnerability, an SSL version 2 and 3 protocol detection vulnerability, an SSL certificate with wrong host name vulnerability, an SSL v3 padding oracle on downgraded legacy encryption vulnerability poodle, an SSL certificate signed using a weak hashing algorithm, and then with the low criteria, we have the SSL CR4 cipher suit supported Bas Mitzvah, which is a low vulnerability, and then a SSL 64-bit block size cipher suit supported, which is also a low vulnerability. On the Ubuntu system, we have 3 medium vulnerabilities, 3 low vulnerabilities, and 35 informative. With the vulnerabilities, we have the DNS server cache snooping, remote information disclosure as well on the Ubuntu system, the same as we had on the Windows system. We have the Apache Linux disclosure, distribution disclosure. We have the remote host running bind or another DNS server, and we have the SSL cannot be trusted, SSL self-signed certificate, SSL anonymous cipher suit supported, and SSL CR4 cipher suit supported by zmaswan1. We also have SSL 64-bit block cipher suit supported suite 32, which is the same thing that we found on the Windows system as well. With the HTTPS security issues, we have the Apache Panel Linux distribution disclosure, and this vulnerability makes it easy for anyone to find valuable information from the Apache server burner, like the version that you're running and what operating system you're running on your server. So it's very important not to disclose any information that's not needed. And to remedy this vulnerability, you can hide the version running on your Apache by going to the httpd.conf file and changing that file. And also we have the SSL 64-bit block size cipher suit supported Swix 32. And this vulnerability can make it easy for man-in-the-middle attacker who has sufficient resources to exploit this vulnerability via a birthday attack to detect a collision that leaks the XOR between the fixed secret and a non-plain text, which will allow the disclosure of secret text such as HTTPS cookies, and possibly resulting in hijacking of an authenticated session. The recommendation for this is to reconfigure the affected application if possible to avoid the use of all 64-bit block ciphers and update to the latest version that is available. And another finding is the remote web server that's not enforcing HSTS, and the lack of the HSTS allows the downgrade attack such as SSL stripping, man-in-the-middle attack, and weakness cookie hijack, and it weakens the cookie hijacking protection. And this really is not a vulnerability but more like informational. With POP3, we have the remote host that is running a server that understands the post office protocol that's used by a mail client to retrieve message from server, possibly across a network link. And you can disable this service if you do not use it, and protect your target with an IP filter. There were no vulnerabilities really that were found on the SMTP server. There were no security issues. We just have the remote host that's running on the mail SMTP server, and it's recommended that if you don't use or need this server, you can remove it because it's a target for spammers. So that's the only informational thing that we have on the SMTP server. The security issues that were found on the DNS servers is DNS having the vulnerability of server cache snooping, remote information disclosure. With this vulnerability, the third-party domains are able to get a response from the remote DNS when they send a query and do not have a bit set for recursion, and it may let the attacker be able to figure out the domain that were resolved recently through the name server, and then be able to see which hosts were visited recently. And the first recommendation for this is to only allow DNS cache to local users. The second recommendation is to not allow non-authoritative authoritative request to DNS cache. You can use the DNS implementation DNS cache, which is for caching only attempts to prevent snooping by declining to answer non-recursive queries. And we also have the remote host that is running on bind or another bind server that reports to its version number when it receives a special request for text version.bind in the domain chaos. So you can possibly hide the version number of bind via using the version directive in the options sections of the named.conf file. The security issues that were found on the SSH is that an SSH server is listening on the port, and there is a possibility of information about the remote SSH server to be obtained by sending an empty authentication request. And the script detects which algorithm and language are supported by the remote service for encryption communication.